Good evening, sir.
Sir,
Good evening.
good evening, sir.
Good evening. We'll get going. And I'd like to finish this a little faster because sitting for a long duration in the morning has made my back pain a bit worse than it was. Anyway, so let's continue with hermeneutics or hermeneutics for the Germans. And we had done the methodological hermeneutics of Wilhelm Dilthey. Yeah, so we had done methodological hermeneutics of Wilhelm Dilthey, and the main concepts that were there was a replacement of objectivity with inter verstehen objective mind. These are the things you'll find in Wilhelm Dilthey. His hermeneutics are called methodological hermeneutics. He replaces the positivist notion. Oh, and there's one more here that I need to add. So he replaces objectivity with intersubjectivity. Uh, and I told you what exactly he means by intersubjectivity. He has a very specific meaning, and for him, intersubjectivity would mean that the reader of a text or a person who is in a conversation, uh, that kind of person should, that person, not that kind of a person, should understand either the text or the person with whom he's conversing. He should understand them as they would like to be intended. The author of a text would have liked to be understood in the in a particular fashion when he expressed himself, and similarly, when we are having a conversation, we should basically also uh, try to understand the other side, the way in which that particular person would want to be understood. That is for him intersubjectivity. Actually, I should have put this relativity of rationality above this. And that is Verstehen. This intersubjectivity is Verstehen, which I told you is the ability to empathize with the other, to think like the other, stop being yourself and start being someone else whom you're trying to understand, be it an author or a person who's conversing with you. And this for him is the objective mind. The objective mind is when you understand someone the way they want to be understood. And in all this, there is this relativity of rationality. There is no one form of rationality. There are different forms of rationality. And all these different forms of rationality and their practitioners exist because they believe that the practices of these rationalities are those which are considered by them as rational and therefore tenable as social practices, which is what I tried to show when I mentioned Peter Winch. And so don't understand an alien culture with your cultural values. Transpose yourself onto the other, into the, not onto the, into the other culture that you're trying to understand. And then if you find something, then if you try to find something, then illogical or inconsistent, and in that particular kind of a situation, you can criticize. But the criticism of one kind of rationality by another type of rationality is not a valid criticism according to Dilthey. So this is all methodological hermeneutics. Obviously, when somebody proposes a theory, somebody else uh, opposes it. So opposition to Dilthey's methodologic. Yes, Prashant.
Sir, Dilda said we have to go to that person's place, I mean that author's place to understand him.
You have to be able to put yourself in his position.
Sir, he said, should we apply same theory even for ideologies?
Uh, Ideologies, again, that's a very big, it's a big field. It is actually, there are, ideology has no one meaning. It has so many different meanings, and quite a few of these meanings are technical. But if you're talking about it as just a simple world view, which is what Dilthey calls Weltanschauungen. Okay, if there are different worldviews, which is a tribal person will see the world differently from you and I. A tribal person looks at the forest as the source of his life. So, whether it is at the stage of, hunter gatherer, or it is at the stage of a nomadic agriculture. Nomadic agriculture, is not like this regular big agriculture that we do these days. Uh, Nomadic agriculture is done on small plots of land. And his worldview is that the forest is the sustaining or the sustainer, sorry, of life. It is the sustainer of life. And because it is the sustainer of life, he basically argues that the ob- the forest should be taken care of, and they don't do any killing of animals for recreation. They do it only because they need to eat. So I told you that across the world, across all different tribes, there is this one practice which basically says, one particular practice which basically says that you have to uh, prey to the animal that you are going to consume. So they say it in different ways, but the prayer, the content is the same, which is a thanking of that animal that has been slain or killed. They are asking the animal for its forgiveness.
Sir, we do halal. Is it safe?
Hmm?
Halal.
No, halal has nothing to do with this. If you want to understand halal, what you need to understand is that the whole notion of halal is actually uh, misplaced. Kind of, it's born out of a misplaced kind of an understanding of blood. Okay, halal is the cutting of the jugular vein, and when you cut the jugular, then the blood doesn't ooze. Then the blood comes like a fountain. It comes in an arc like a fountain. That is halal. And for the Muslims, halal is very important because they believe that blood can have uh, all kinds of infections or whatever. And therefore, you have to let that blood out. And if it is not a proper cutting of the jugular, then the whole blood doesn't drain from the body of the animal. So these people basically, therefore, they say halal is actually where you're letting out the blood so that all the impurities, all the infections, and those things are gone. And they also don't believe in eating a dead animal. Okay, and that is why halal is done very, very gradually. If you're in Hyderabad, if you go to a fish shop to buy, uh, say, marl fish, okay, if you go to buy a marl fish, then what you find is that Muslims will be asking for zinda marl. They'll be asking for a zinda marl, which means that at the time when uh, the owner of the fish shop will chop the fish, it should be alive, not dead. It should not be dead at the time when he's cutting it up. If it is not, um, if it is not alive at that time, then they won't buy it. So this is I started by telling you that this is a misconception. It's a misconception because you must understand blood is not necessarily impure. There are very few infections in the world, especially in the animal world, that are related to the blood of the animal. Okay, in fact, blood is considered to be sterile, right? Sterile meaning not carrying any impurities, nothing. So, blood is considered to be sterile. So, this idea that there will be infections is a wrong idea. Infections are usually contained in entrails. Entrails are the internal organs and mainly the lower part of the uh, body, such as
Intestines.
intestines. That's one of the entrails. Intestines, liver, kidneys. So all these are counted as entrails. So they eat the entrails. They eat the entrails, which are the source of most of the infections that we can get from an animal. Okay, and they also eat the brain, which is another source of infection. Not they, I mean, people who eat an animal. But I'm talking about Muslims here because you're talking about halal. The brain is another source of infections. People eat that. People eat hoofs. People eat the tongue. Paya, zaban, bheja, kaleja, gurda. These are all the words, right? And these are actually the potential carriers of infection. But fortunately, in India, everything that we cook, everything that we cook is above 70 to 80 degrees centigrade. And because of that high level of cooking, high heat in cooking, most of the bacteria or all of the bacteria and viruses die. So when people were catching bird flu in foreign countries, in India, people didn't catch, not a single person got affected by the bird flu or the avian flu, as it was called. People were scared, and because of the Western media's influence, and the price of chicken, the first time avian flu happened, it fell to something like 5 rupees a kilo or something, And quite a few people were merrily buying this and eating it because you are getting it at such a low price. And nothing happened to anyone because it is cooked at a very, very high temperature, 80 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit. Okay, um, so halal in that sense is misplaced. The Sikhs have another concept, which is not to cause suffering to the animal. So they believe in ek jhatka. Okay, so you have to sever the neck of the animal with one chop like they did with the guillotine in the French Revolution. Ek jhatka, so that the animal doesn't feel a thing. Okay, so that is not a part of tribal culture. Neither ek jhatka nor halal are parts of a tribal culture. Tribal culture is praying. You must have asked me about prayer uh, during cutting, because the butcher who's doing the halal actually recites the Bismillah. He recites the Bismillah into the ear or close to the ear of the animal which is being on which is performing halal, and he does so not out of thanks or anything, but it's just a religious belief which says that, you know, God will give an easy death to the animal. So the Sikhs see halal as a form of death, which is, what should I say, brutal, because you're not killing the animal immediately. You're not killing the animal immediately. You're reading that Bismillah prayer and then cutting it. So it suffers, is what they believe. And the Muslims believe that the Sikhs are wrong. In fact, that egg chatka is something that is unhealthy for them. And therefore, they basically uh, talk about, what should I say? They talk about the fact that egg chatka is not good. It's not at all good. So those are very different things. Just reading a prayer, that's not asking for forgiveness. Please remember that. And you're not praying to the animal. You're praying to God to give an easy passage to the animal. And you're not apologizing to the animal. You aren't doing any of these things. So, keeping these things in view, you must understand that halal has nothing to do with the tribal practice. But tribes across the world usually, after killing the animal, they kill it in whichever way is possible. If it's a large animal, then it takes a number of people to kill it, and they'll kill it in whatever way they can, and then pray to it and thank it. The essence of that prayer is that, can you hear a dinging? Or is it just me? Are you hearing ding, ding, bell?
No,
No,
sir.
sir.
No? Good. Then fine. Because I'm hearing a bell. Yeah. So the thing, therefore, is that these people pray and say thank you for giving up your life so that we can live today. Okay, that's how they look at the animal. And I also told you, if we want honey out of a beehive, typically we'll go smoke the bees out and bring the whole honey down, the whole hive down, I'm sorry, and then harvest the honey from it. But forest dwellers, the Adivasis, the tribal people, these people do not take the whole uh, this thing, the whole honeybees hive. They take just a part of it, leave the rest of it as it is, because the they want the bees to return to that hive and want to build it again so that they can keep harvesting. So that's how they look at it. And this is not how we look at things. We don't look at things in this particular manner. And I don't know, especially the upper castes, you may have seen before people eat food, um, either in a banana leaf or in some other form of a leaf, uh, people take water, they do this around the leaf, and at the top this is where the leaf is, they do this with water, and then they do this at the top. People will tell you, ask them why they do it. People will tell you that it is done because of the fact that uh, you want to keep the ants and other insects from crawling onto the what should I say, from crawling onto your leaf in which you're eating. That is not the thing. Today people don't know. You also apparently have to recite a certain shloka while you are doing this around the leaf. I don't know what that shloka is. And the 3 times putting drops is food paying homage to food. Food paying homage to food basically means that as per the Vedas, we are all food. The whole world is food because it is alive. The whole universe is alive. So everything here is food. So even when you're eating, not necessarily meat, even if you're eating something which is in the nature of, just food, you do this as a thanksgiving kind of a thing, food offering, homage to food again. That is the true significance of that act. So a lot of people do it without knowing what they are doing, why they are doing that. So many people do it. That is not being able to comprehend or understand the rationality of others or the rationality of their own practices, which is what Hegel calls positive law or positivity or dead objectivity. Anyway, so having talked about these things, about rationality, now let's try and see the opposition that came up to Dilthey from within the ranks of those who believed in hermeneutics. The opposition came from within the ranks of those who believed in hermeneutics, and that opposition most clearly came from Hans Gadamer, another German. Hans Gadamer has issues with Dilthey. Initial part of Gadamer's life, he was influenced by Dilthey. Then he came under the influence of postmodernism, and then became a totally different kind of a thinker about hermeneutics. Does anyone understand what postmodernism is?
No, sir.
Okay. There are two definitions of postmodernism. The first one is that in the modern period, the human being has achieved everything that there is achieved. This is the kind of belief you'll find in Hegel. He thought with him there was the realization of the purpose of history. I won't talk much more than that now. And therefore, he's called the high priest of modernity or modernism. Okay? And the corollary to this, okay, before I go to the corollary, let me also talk to you about Francis Fukuyama, who talked about the end of history, which is, he said, now history is the story of the progress of the humankind, and humankind has reached the goals of development and everything fully. So there's nothing left now except to sit back and enjoy life. So what is the corollary of this kind of thinking? The corollary of this kind of thinking is postmodernism is a rehashing of all things.
Sir, what is meant by corollary?
One second. Rehashing of all things achieved. I got the spellings wrong here. Now, is it IE or EI?
IE.
IE, right? That's what. That's what I thought. No, why am I putting this here? All the things achieved by modernity or modernism. Yeah, you wanted to know what a corollary is.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember your botany from school?
I have biology, sir, for botany.
You remember that? There is a thing called corolla.
No, sir.
No? It's a part of a flower. Corolla. Okay. And a corolla is that which is useful in reproduction of that species of that particular species of plants or Yeah, plants, trees, got it. So when you say something is a corollary, something that is attached and derived out of the original theory. Okay, how you derive something out and extend a conclusion. You extend a conclusion from that original theory. So this kind of a thing is a corollary of that thought that everything that needs to be achieved has been achieved. And therefore, what do? You will only do what has already been done. I had a major falling out while doing my PhD with one of my supervisors. See, I stick to my guns. So I told my supervisor, it doesn't matter if I don't have a PhD. I don't give two hoots. But I don't agree with you. His idea was there was nothing new to say in political theory. So he said, whatever work you do, you have to show your scholarship. Okay. And every idea that you mention, you should show 10 citations. I said, why isn't there anything new to be said in political theory? There are a number of new things that can be said. He said, no, it's all been said. So I told you, thank you very much. I don't want to do my PhD under you. So they allotted me to another chap who I thought was my well-wisher and from whom I benefited immensely while doing my MA. So I thought that'll be more meaningful. Something went wrong there. After I finished writing my whole thesis, he says, remove the first 50 pages. And I said, then what does a thesis stand on? So he said, see, you're talking so much about ancient Greece. You know, we don't know. I'm giving you this example for a reason. If one man spoke like a postmodernist of this variety, the other man spoke like Gadamer, or yeah, he did. He spoke like Gadamer, but didn't subscribe to Gadamer. So he said, if you're looking at Greek thought, you're looking at it in English, and we don't know. The subtleties may be lost. And you want to work on Kant and Hegel. And Kant and Hegel are both people who are Germans. Your German is not all that good. And you want to work on all non-English speaking people in English. So I said, English is not my mother tongue. Okay. I said, English is not my mother tongue. So why should I work in English at all? And why are people producing these books? And you taught me Hegel, and you told me Charles Taylor is this great scholar of Hegel. He wrote that book in English. You talked about Marx, but you didn't talk about the fact that Marx didn't write in English. So why are we studying all these people? He had no answer for that, and I just decided this hypocrisy was a bit too much. So I bid goodbye to that particular university. I said, thank you very much. I've had enough of you. You and your self-righteous conceptions, which you can't sustain in the face of an argument. And therefore, and I had decided that I'll not do my PhD. It's not worth it. You have to compromise on everything everywhere. Write according to what somebody is trying to tell you. So I changed universities. Fortunately, my guide, Professor Rama Melkote, she actually said, you do it with me. And to her credit, she didn't change a single word of what I wrote. She didn't change a single word of what I wrote. And my PhD came in for a lot of critical acclaim. Let's forget that. Now, what you need to understand is that this is the first definition. What is the second definition? That modernity failed to realize what it set out to realize. And they go on to say it has created false knowledge. That's what they say. Modernity failed to realize what it set out to realize, and all that it did was create false knowledge. So postmodernity is a critique in the second sense. In the second sense, it is a critique of modernity. Okay? It is a critique of the beliefs of modernity. Now, when I'm talking about postmodernism here, in the context of Gadamer, what I am basically trying to tell you is that he became a postmodernist of the second variety, not the first variety. Okay? And therefore, his inspirations Yeah, these were his two main inspirations, Heidegger and Foucault. The other day, I was reading an essay just a few days back, beautifully written essay, which tells you that the biggest academic and worldly scam ever made was or is postmodernism. Apart from disrupting whatever little knowledge we have and replacing it with all kinds of rubbish, it has not achieved anything. So that author is a very, very vitriolic uh, postmodernist. I mean, critique of postmodernism. He said that there are great things that were achieved by modernism, but postmodernism undid all those and didn't provide anything as an alternative. So that is what you have to remember, that everything about postmodernism is not necessarily good. And Foucault is not a consistent thinker. There are lots of ideas of Foucault which contradict each other. So you can't pick up Foucault as, Foucault's ideas as one totality and talk about them. You have to cherry pick and talk about which idea is what. So Foucault is that. In fact, this author was a Frenchman, uh, Jean Baptiste, uh, I forget the last name. And this man says Foucault, all that he could do was disrupt. And all that he spoke is rubbish, which is a bit too harsh. And he has the same kind of thing to say about Heidegger. He says Heideggerian phenomenology, which gave rise to existential movements uh, in France and in Germany, only led to the debasement of human society into an immoral abyss. It pushed it into an immoral abyss. And there is nothing to celebrate about Heidegger. That's what he claims. Well, I wouldn't be so vitriolic, but there is a point to what he's saying about this whole post-modern thing. It's okay, you can criticize modernism. Nothing is beyond criticism, but your criticism shouldn't become disruption. Now, disruption is a word that went from academics into the parlance of marketing, and now every idiot who writes an essay on marketing will say Apple creates products that disrupt the market. What product have they created that has disrupted the market? How did they disrupt the market? Is the iPhone something else? It's just an expensive version. Apple computers, what did they do to disrupt the market? They use the same computer technology. It's just that the two companies that I dislike, three, but Google, I'll leave it out of this. But the two companies that really want to build monopolies are Apple and uh, what should I say, Microsoft. Microsoft wants everybody to use Windows in everything we do. And it's a pity people have fallen lock, stock, and barrel. And because everybody is using only that, even people like me who are not fans of Microsoft have to use their Microsoft Office. Otherwise, if I use Ubuntu, which I tried, Microsoft creates problems if you send it to somebody who has a Windows-based device. Though Ubuntu is absolutely compatible with Microsoft's programs, nevertheless, Microsoft will still create issues. That is the sad part. They want a monopoly. Same thing with iPod, iPhone, iTunes. You want to listen to music on an iPhone, you have to draw them from iTunes. So all that is bunkum. It is complete rubbish. Okay, so there's no disruption or anything in the marketplace. If anybody disrupts it, then you'll have something else instead of capitalism. As long as capitalism is continuing, it means that nobody is disrupting anything. Please remember that. But disruptions have happened in philosophy. Heidegger is a disruptionist. Foucault is a disruptionist. While I don't think too highly of postmodernism, and I don't think highly of Gadamer at all, I'm putting my belief out here in first. Nor do I think much of Derrida. These are all people who play with words. At least Heidegger and Foucault are not that. There is some substance to their criticism. But Gadamer and Derrida, reconstruction, deconstruction, both put together the biggest pile of BS. Anyway, now that I've made my position clear, let's go explore this great man, Gadamer. Gadamer does not exegete, means an interpreter. Exegete is an okay. Gadamer believes that in the process of exegesis, or in the process of interpretation and understanding, the exegete cannot put himself in another person's position. If you ask him why, his answer is Dilthey is claiming that, say, Hobbes here, since I spoke about the state of nature the other day, he would say if Hobbes is rooted in his time, okay, if he is rooted in his time, even you who is reading Hobbes are a person rooted in your own time. You who are reading Hobbes are rooted in your own time. Why should you go and put yourself in somebody else's shoes? You don't need to. You really don't need to. And he says you can't do it. Not only is it that you don't need to, you can't do it. If that man, Hobbes, is rooted in his own time, then you are rooted in your own time. So, what you have are your own concerns. Why are you reading philosophy? Why are you reading texts? Why are you doing it? He says you're doing all this because you want to make sense of your time. What is in German Zeitgeist. Schleiermacher, while talking about his own brand of hermeneutics, used this Zeitgeist. Now Google uses it everywhere, so much so that has become a meaningless phrase. Zeit is time, Geist is the spirit of. So you are a spirit of your own time. Remember, it's not written with a capital G. It's being written with a small g, which means it's the infinite. It's not the infinite spirit, but it is a finite spirit, which is you, the individual. So you're a product of your own time. You're reading things in order to make sense of yourself. You're reading things in order to make sense of yourself. So that is zeitgeist. Okay. So he says, since it's all zeitgeist, how can you basically uproot yourself from wherever you were? you are sorry, and go into somebody else's place. So what is he saying then? What do you do? He believes in, like, he agrees with Dilthey's but where is the disagreement? The disagreement is about transposing or dislocating yourself and going somewhere else. He also agrees with Dilthey on rationality, relative okay, but he disagrees why so? Yet again, the same argument. What is the same argument? The argument is, if that man is whoever you're interpreting is in his own cultural context as an author or even as a person you're talking with, having a conversation with, just imagine you're having a conversation with an American or a foreigner. I don't know how many of you have had conversations with foreigners. I have never struggled to have a conversation with a foreigner, but most people struggle to uh, have conversations with foreigners, and these foreigners also struggle to have a conversation with, say, Indians. And a lot of these foreigners who used to come here, they used to tell me that you are not like an Indian. It's so easy to communicate with you. It's so easy to communicate with you. That's what they say. Okay. But that is because I have learned about their culture. I have learned about their history. I have learned about their value systems. And I know what is right for them and what is not right for them. I fully understand that they eat dinner at 5:30 or 6 in the evening. So when we had these guests, we used to serve dinner at 5:30, 6. And they used to say, everywhere else we have been, people don't serve us dinner till 9 o'clock, but you serve us dinner. So don't worry, it's okay. So what am I doing by serving them dinner at 5:30 or 6? I am actually putting myself in their shoes. Because I know they feel hungry at that time. That is how they are. So, where is the difficulty in conversing with somebody by putting yourself in his place or her place? Okay. And when you talk about things, if you suspend your own beliefs and therefore suspend judgments on other people's beliefs, you can talk about those to them in the same way in which they talk about, in the same way in which they talk about them. So there was a time when in one of my trips to America, a professor said, Satish should be made an honorary citizen of America. And I did all this to try and understand if Gadamer's critique of Dilthey is right or wrong. I wanted to see if I could actually place myself in somebody else's shoes. I wanted to see that. That's why I made the attempt. And we had a couple of German Swiss friends. They have an ethic. While they are entertaining guests, they don't take phone calls. They don't take phone calls because they consider it an insult to take phone calls from someone else while they are entertaining guests. Now, it occurred to me that the opposite is also true, which is while you're in their house, while you're in their house, while you're being entertained, while you're being entertained by them as a guest, you can't take a phone call there. So I switch it off. Or I used to put it on silent every time I met these people. How difficult is that? How difficult is that? It is not. Similarly, even if you're talking about a culture, don't judge it from the lens of now, if it is somewhere in the past. Because of this whole idea of rationality being relative. People don't do things thinking that it is irrational. They don't. So you have to temper your understanding of the past with an open mind and say they are using another form of rationality, which might not sit in comfortably with your own beliefs. It might not sit in comfortably with your own beliefs, but you have to have an open mind. You have an open mind, you understand. You understand all things. That is what I say is the difference between Gandhi on one side and Nehru and Ambedkar on the other side. They are typically products of liberal education. Nehru and Ambedkar. So they look everything from the positivist lens, that history is linear, rationality is linear. And so Ambedkar weaves conspiracy theories where none exist. Ambedkar's understanding of Indian history is very, very poor. Gandhi is not like that. Gandhi didn't believe in the industrial civilization. He understood the industrial civilization. He understood what was there before in Jesus Christ. He understood what was there in Sanatana Dharma. He understood the difference between Varna system and the Jati system, which I'm afraid the others didn't. And therefore, Gandhi had the ability to include everyone. He understood the logic of the Muslims. He understood why they think the way they do, which was taken as appeasement of Muslims by the likes of Godse. He understood that. And that's why he could think of an undivided India. He could think of that. He could conceive of it. He didn't see anything happening wrong if there was one nation for all. So you see, it's not difficult to put yourself in somebody else's position if you are willing to do it. If you're willing to do it, it is a whole thing about your willingness to put yourself in another person's shoes, in another person's historical context. So let's get on with it. I believe Verstehen is possible, but Gadamer didn't believe it. Empathy, not possible. But he said intersubjectivity is possible, right? So what kind of intersubjectivity is it then that he's talking about? He says instead of Verstehen and the creative of the objective mind, he talks about Fusion of horizons. What exactly does this mean? In principle, I am not against Dilthey, but I think the methodology is completely wrong, is the stand that Gadamer is taking. So he says fusion of horizons is a okay. Here, because of the objective mind, there is a retrieval of original meanings, which is understand somebody the way they like you to understand. Now, Madam had asked me yesterday that then how will you be critical? I gave you the example of the Swiss people, where in their culture, you can't take a phone call from somebody else when you're entertaining guests. And there is a reciprocity. The guest is also expected, usually in the days when there were no cell phones, I guess there was no question of the guest taking a call because he won't get a call there anyway. But in the days of the cell phones, also you're following the same ethic, and therefore there is a reciprocal component. So if there is a reciprocal component, the question then is, when I am following them, am I believing what they are doing is right? No, I'm not believing that what they are doing is right. There always used to be a fear. I am against all electronics. Okay, and these days I've begun to hate the whole idea of cars, motorcycles, my two major passions in life, becoming more and more like home appliances with all kinds of stupid electronics in them. I'm not a fan of electronics. I'm not a fan of the cellular telephony and all. But I got myself a phone for only one reason. And that is if I'm needed at home. Because I don't have any siblings. I don't have anybody else to take care of the people at home. If something happens, if somebody calls me, I mean, somebody should be able to call me. That was the belief I had. That's why I got myself a cell phone in the first place. Now, of course, you can't live without a cell phone, and that too a smartphone. But just look at it this way. If somebody is calling me, telling me, listen, your father needs to be rushed to hospital, and if I am not taking the call, if I'm not taking the call because that will be offensive to my hosts, then I don't think that's such a wise thing. It's not a wise thing because people are trying to reach me for a reason which may be an emergency. And if I say the 2 hours or 2.5 hours I'm sitting here with these people, I'm not going to look at the phone. It's a dangerous thing. So every time I actually didn't switch it off. I used to put it on silent and vibrate. If the phone rang, and if it did repeatedly, I would excuse myself and say I need to use the restroom. And I used to go and check who called. And I also used to check if somebody has put a message, then come out. But that's not such a great ethic. You can pick up a phone call and say, look, I'm somewhere outside. I can't talk to you if it is just a rubbish call. But if it is an SOS, not just from my family, it can be from anyone who requires help. At that time, this is just becoming ignoring, isn't it? So the thing is, you can be critical of it. You can internalize their practice and find fault with it. I hope I have made this clearer now, ma'am, since yesterday. Anyway, so if we are saying that there's no first day and there is this midway meeting of the ideas of the past and ideas of the present, how are the ideas of the past coming midway? Please try to understand that. How are the ideas of the past coming midway? You are alive, or if you're having a conversation with someone who's alive, fine. You can have ideas exchanged by meeting midway. But if I'm reading a text, how does a text come halfway? So what Gadamer is calling fusion of horizons is basically trying to tell you, get some broad understanding of the context and interpret it from your point of view. Get a broad understanding of that context and understand it from your point of view. That is the fusion of horizons. that replaces Verstehen and the objective mind. For him, there is no original meaning. That is one point. The second point, and this is, in my opinion, a valid point. This is a valid point. What is a valid point? The valid point is that sometimes people change their ideas and their mind. So where is the original meaning? That is a definitely valid, very valid point. Despite my dislike for postmodernism and all that, what Gadamer is saying about this is absolutely true. You have no less a person than Ludwig Wittgenstein, who wrote the Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. In the Tractatus Logico Philosophicus, Ludwig Wittgenstein argued that every word has an empirical referent. And because every word has one empirical referent, it has a single meaning which cannot be misunderstood. That was the position he took while he wrote the Tractatus Logico Philosophicus in the 1920s. I think he wrote it around 1925, 26. Okay, this was the idea he had. Every word has an empirical referent. Unless there is something to refer to, you can't have words. Okay, you can't have words because they have to refer to something. And if they are referring to something, then there can't be a misunderstanding because the empirical referent is clear. Then he understood the cultural context, the idea of the cultural context, how one word can be used in different ways in different cultures. In my time, in my younger days, smoking was not considered to be a very bad thing. It was also not considered to be a good thing, but nobody objected to smoking. So in college, a lot of people used to say, "Hey, do you have an extra fag?" Cigarettes were called fags. Okay, can I borrow a fag? That's how people used to speak. At the same time in America, people use fag for homosexual. Here, this was just fag, which was purely a word referring to a cigarette. And it had no, and it was not a shortening of something. In America, it was a shortening of faggot, F-A-G-G-O-T. And a faggot is a homosexual. So if you say, can I have a fag? To an American, God help you. That was how it was then. This realization that words can mean different things in different cultures, both synchronically and diachronically, dawned on Ludwig Wittgenstein, and he said, I was wrong in some of the things that I said in Tractatus Logico Philosophicus, and he wrote his philosophical investigations, which had to be published posthumously because he died while he was just about ending it. It came out in 1942, I think, in which he took a position completely opposite to the position that he took in Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. So, yes, people change their ideas, change their mind. Wordsworth was an ardent supporter of the French Revolution at one time, but after the Jacobin terror, he became anti-French Revolution and got soundly criticized in a poem by Robert Browning. So people change. So to that extent, you do have to agree with Gadamer that yes, people can change. So maybe there are no original meanings that you can retrieve. Maybe. Or maybe you can retrieve several original meanings from one writer, depending upon his own history, his own experience, and the history of his time. For him, for Gadamer, the hermeneutic never complete. Whereas with the objective mind, the retrieval of meanings, Dilthey believed that the hermeneutic could be a complete thing. An idea echoed in the anthropology of Peter Winch. But in Gadamer, the hermeneutic is never complete. Why? Because he says, with the passage of time and in different places, cultural contexts keep changing. And since the cultural contexts are going on changing, people's ideas also will be changing. And if the interpreter or the exegete cannot uproot himself from his context, then a Britisher in 21st century reading Hobbes will get a completely different meaning out of him than, say, a Britisher who was reading Hobbes in the 19th century, or an Indian reading Hobbes in the 21st century will look at his text and his ideas from a completely different perspective compared to the British person who read Hobbes in the 21st century. So, you can have those infinite combinations, place, time, you can keep changing the variables. So he says the hermeneutic process is never complete. And all knowledge is valid. Because of this, he's not saying hermeneutics is bad. He says all knowledge is valid as long as you are clear in your mind as to what you're looking for. So that all interpretations are valid as long as there is clarity of purpose. And in conclusion, history and ideas offer infinite reconstructions. History and ideas offer infinite reconstructions. Oh, no wonder it wasn't fitting in. I originally thought I'll do Derrida, but I realized that we have done almost 2 hours and my back is gone boom. I was just thinking, I originally told you this morning that I will do Aristotle, but I think I will do neoliberalism, because then that whole libertarianism, Rawlsian liberalism, and neoliberalism, all of them are done with. First of all, neoliberalism is not worth studying. There is no such thing as neoliberalism. Anything you want to call neoliberalism is neoliberalism. You want to call the invention of computers neoliberalism, that is neoliberalism. If you want to call, uh, you know, economic reforms neoliberalism, that is neoliberalism. Anything is neoliberalism. If you want to stick on to the old ideas, that is also neoliberalism. So anything and everything is neoliberalism. So tomorrow let me finish that off, and I realized that the days of my having time to do things at a nice, comfortable speed are gone. 10:40, I think Madam will appear tomorrow. So I have to finish. I'll finish neoliberalism tomorrow. There's nothing to say in it, frankly. It shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. But I'm the master of stretching things, so I will. Okay then. And neoliberalism should be understood more as an idea of economics than as an idea of politics. Any questions? Is anybody here, or have we all gone away?
Yes, sir. We are there.
Oh, you're there. Questions? Okay, I guess there is none. Amulya, I told you I'll try and speak to you today, but I need to lie down. My back is gone. I have asked the head permission. He wouldn't pick up the call. I sent him a message. He doesn't answer. So let me see. I'll take my chance. I can't go to college because I can't stand. I just can't stand straight, let alone walk. So I probably won't be able to go for 2 or 3 days. So
Sir, tomorrow we can.
tomorrow at 12 we can. I'll put a link for you. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because tomorrow they'll also have other classes. I can't stretch like I did today. And okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.